So all those in favour?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect, thank you. Right, we'll move on to, I think we're up to item 11 now. Right, kia ora. And Denise.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take my report as read and just make a few comments before I take any questions. This is your regular twice-yearly update on priority submissions, and in this update we are recommending that you approve 6 new priority consultations, which are Building Act changes to give effect to any decisions arising from the Making It Easier to Build Granny Flats consultation that took place last year, the Local Government Systems Improvement Bill, the National Policy Direction and Standards Package, the replacement legislation for the Resource Management Act, the Term of Parliament Enabling 4-Year Term Legislation Amendment Bill, and Taumata Arawai's proposed Wastewater Environment Performance Standards. And just noting that your approval today gives staff permission to commence work on the submission once the consultation opens, but the draft submissions will then be brought back to the relevant committee for approval. So you're only giving approval today to start work on those submissions. They'll still come back to you to be approved once they've been worked on. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Cool. I've got a mover from Councillor Baker and a seconder, Councillor Turner. Seems pretty straightforward, but I think there's a question from Councillor Walker.
I've got a question just around the genetically modified organism issue. We didn't put any submission into the government on that. We were, and the Mayor would be familiar with this, a member of the Inter-Council Working Party on GMOs, and we took a strong position as a consequence in the unitary plan, and the legislation on government's part does have an impact on us. I could speak to that at length, I won't. It does concern me that we're not continuing to pick up on those sorts of issues, which don't necessarily require a great deal of effort, particularly when there are other councils, far north and others, that are applying themselves to this issue. And there was, and as far as I know still is, an inter-council working party, as much and all as it hasn't met recently. So how do we get on around those issues which arguably are priorities?
I'm happy to take that, thanks, through the chair. So that was an example where there was a bill right at the end of the year, and there was no time for us from there to the beginning of February to work with any of you to get any sense of whether that was a priority for the council. We didn't realise it was coming up. The purpose of this report is to obviously do that scan and to try and get ahead of it as much as we can, so that we can raise the areas where we think there may be a desire or it's worthwhile looking into doing a submission. So we're doing a little bit of looking behind us in terms of the Gene Technology Bill. That has now completed its submission process. It's now before the Select Committee. There's nothing we can do. We can abide by any decisions or any implications that come out of that bill. But if there are other matters into the future, depending on that, whether that's through the unitary plan review, I think we'll definitely have another conversation through the unitary plan review in the next few years around that. And any implications of that bill, when it becomes an act, we will come back to you and talk you through that. But look, the purpose of this is to try and catch all of the things we think are relevant, and where we haven't, we will still come to you when we have time, and we didn't have time on that one because of the timeframes of the government, to see if you in fact do want to do a submission.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, I guess the concern that I've got is other councils did have time and they reacted, and particularly in a circumstance where we were and maybe still are a member of an inter-council working party, we missed the boat. So I have an outstanding concern there. I don't know how that happened, but it certainly concerns me, and I would have thought it would have concerned the Mayor, because he was at one point associated with a council that is taking a position on this. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah.
I
No, this
would
is what-
hope that we're able to pick up these things much better in the future.
Yep, so councillor Walker, I'm not sure if you sent a request on that. These items come up on the agenda all the time to prioritise as many submissions as possible. We don't have any staff and expertise on the issue you were talking about, but we didn't have any requests from anyone around this table until 3 days before the submissions closed. And we have given feedback to government that the amount of legislation we're being asked to comment on, especially over the Christmas summer period, was almost impossible to deal with. But this is the purpose of this report, as we've had a number of times this term, to try and prioritise staff to get working on as many of the submissions as possible. But no one until Councillor Lee came to us 4 days before the close off, there was just not the time to process. There are lots of submissions we have not been able to process due to staff availability, staff time, and the sheer number of things coming at us. So I'll defend the staff here that we...
Through you, Mr. Chair.
No, I've finished the conversation.
I think there were a number of communications from members of the public around this, and I'm sure the officers are aware of that, and maybe they're aware of the work that other councils were doing that we could have piggybacked on, even much smaller councils than this.
Yeah, so Member Ashby.
Tēnā korua. Thanks for the report. Just a quick one from me. And I note it's basically about Māori engagement. And thanks for the report. I think it's a good idea to send a copy of the report out to iwi so they have the list. It is very much a game of whack-a-mole with submissions even for council, and I know iwi and Mātai Waka also struggle. So just a question, like what other things do you think you can do to help bring those perspectives into the council submission? I know you're working with Ngā Matarai as well, so one of the things I could suggest is working proactively with our Haukura Secretariat, but are there any other things you think you could do to help?
Kia ora, thank you for the question. And yes, acknowledging obviously the speed at which these consultations are happening and the frequency does make it very challenging for staff to meaningfully engage with iwi mana whenua and Mātāwaka in the way that they would like to. Obviously it is still part of the process that they undertake to ask for any input and to provide copies of draft submissions as well. But also another step that we can and do take is to look at plans and other resolved positions to see where we've previously have engaged with iwi mana whenua and are aware of what their positions are around a particular issue and can incorporate them in that way.
And sorry, again, just to again encourage you to reach out proactively to our Secretariat who might be able to help.
Yes, I appreciate that, and we'll definitely pass that on to the staff. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I just wanted to address this issue about us sometimes doing submissions and sometimes not doing submissions that smaller councils are able to get to. So I'd just like to understand a little bit about some of the complexity involved when we do a submission that is actually because of our size. Like you would assume that a smaller council has fewer resources, but they also potentially have fewer departments they need to get around, fewer stakeholders and partners they need to talk to. So I wondered if you could just expand on that a little bit in terms of some of, and this may be a Megan question rather than a, in terms of the complexity of the work that goes into a submission for us. And that by doing this, we're saying we want that work to happen for this list. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, certainly the size and complexity of the organisation and the amount of other work that staff are undertaking is a significant issue in terms of our ability to resource those things. You're correct. And I think also it's worth noting that the prioritisation criteria for the for submissions, it's resourcing is a part of that. but it's not the only part of it. We also assess issues such as whether there are other options available, less resource-intensive options available than making a submission. So we may already be involved in industry groups or sector groups where we can pass on our feedback that way, or have relationships directly with ministries and so forth. Also we're making an assessment, frankly, about whether there is what value council can add to the issue, can add to the consultation, and that's where the question of whether council has the internal expertise on the subject comes into it as well. So obviously we don't know what processes other councils are using to make those decisions about what they submit on, but we do have quite a complex set of criteria, I guess, that we're using to assess that.
And maybe just to add, councillor, that we also know we have our local boards, and I know that we probably know that we don't do as good a job as we would love to work through with them to get their feedback, as their views and preferences of their local communities on these matters, and it can be incredibly difficult, almost impossible to do that in a 20 working day cycle, that we're often given. So we know we would love to do better, we need to do better, but even that is just almost impossible sometimes, just again in the way that we're structured and what we need to deal with in Auckland. Yeah.
Thank you. And another question, just where there are submission opportunities that we are unable to take up, perhaps they're not on this list, or we just don't have enough time, and they come up too quickly before we can do this process. Would it be possible, if we were still a member of LGNZ, to potentially do a shorter process by which we support their submission, which we cannot do because we are not a member of LGNZ?
Yes, through the chair, that is right, and we can contribute, or we could contribute to other, staff at that level to contribute to those submissions that LGNZ or others might be doing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lilly.
Yes, I just want to take up the concern that Councillor Walker raised, and you'll be aware of my concern in regard to the government's new bill in relation to GMOs and our own Auckland Unitary Plan and our own statutory responsibilities. I just, now I have the opportunity, I did respond by email to Megan Tyler's message, but I think decisions around submissions from this council relating to important, sensitive, and something socially sensitive, politically sensitive legislation, and our own Auckland Unitary Plan should have been brought before this committee for a decision one way or the other, rather than leaving it to management on the basis of lack of resources. That is really how resources are allocated, should really be, in these sorts of matters, a political decision. Otherwise, it doesn't reflect well on the council.
Is that a question, Councillor Lee? Because this bill was tabled on the 20th of December.
Because
so, yeah.
what we
thank you.
need,
Councillor,
I don't want to be
Mayor
just channeled into having to ask a question or not when I make a comment, but the point is,
well, that's not,
the question is then, for all of us, what are we going to do to ensure that this does not happen again? Thank you.
Councillor Lee, the purpose of this agenda item is to try and prevent this stuff happening. The bill was put out on the 20th of December. I don't know about you, but I wasn't at work the week after that. So the issue is we did not have decision-making in January, as you know, and we had already approved the direction for upcoming bills. No one, apart from you, and thank you, came to staff or myself until 4 days before, and that does not give us time to talk to local boards, talk to mana whenua, and we do not have someone on staff with the expertise to do that. So you've been explained that. We could try and fund more staff, that would be more rates, and we could also work in January, or we could send messages to the government to tell them to stop putting bills over the Christmas period, which I have said at Select Committee. Thank you. I don't need any more comment. Mayor Brown.
I've got a question. In some of these ones, councillors have a range of views. Some of the ones we've got pretty well united views on some of these ones, but will you be able to, will a submission where there is a range of views state that there is a range of views? It may well be a majority prefer something or other, but one or two don't.
Well, as previously stated, and thank you for the question, Mayor, the staff who are preparing the submissions will come back to the appropriate committee to work through them with you. And so in terms of whether what they state in the submission around the position of council, that would be a discussion for you to have with them. And so if you wanted to put that forward, that you could have that discussion with them at that committee when they come back with the submission.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mayor. Right, I'll get you both to... Oh, sorry, Councillor Watson.
Yeah, I just want to respond to the more general problem that has been signalled here in point 10 in respect of this trend, which was, to be fair, was started by the last government of asking council to, to prepare submissions in increasingly short periods of time and at, unhelpful times of the year, though I guess we have to be a little careful ourselves. When I look at the backdrop to some of the decisions we're making, we haven't exactly covered ourselves in glory either in terms of springing things on people. But leave that aside, I'm just wondering in terms of that reality, which is obviously something of a tactical ploy. I mean, let's be honest about it. Again, we're not above it ourselves. Is there any thoughts from officers in respect of how we can adapt to that environment in terms of the extent of the submission, or I don't know, is there ability to get an initial submission in and then follow it up with more detail? Has any thought been given to how we can cope with this political tactic that has characterised the last couple of terms of government?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I mean, this process is a part of that. It's our ability to assess ahead of time what's coming and get ahead of that, and for staff to start their thought processes and research and whatever they need to do to put the submissions together is a part of that. And I think one comment I would make is that we do generally, with this government, we have generally had a pretty good roadmap of what's coming, because, for example, the coalition agreements are very detailed. It's when they're coming is what's a lot more difficult to predict. But I think by setting out what we think is likely in the next 6 months, we give ourselves a good chance of getting ahead of that. Having said that, there, as the paragraph 10 is sort of trying to point out, there definitely will, we anticipate there will still be times when things get dropped on us at pretty short notice.
So just very quickly then, is there any technique and response in terms of a more briefer responses that buy time to go back with additional information or anything like that, or is it everything sort of countenanced on a full, thorough, researched response? Is there any way of getting around these kind of surprise periods?
Only really with the permission of the select committee. So, and there have been occasions where, maybe only one or two that I can think of in recent times, but where we have been able to talk to the select committee and been able to put in a sort of a placeholder and then a more detailed submission later, usually to accommodate timeframes for the committee to approve the submission.
No, very good question, Councillor Watson. And yeah, as I said, it is often the first thing I say at select committee, the timing and the time, consider it as well for the public. I mean, there were so many submissions that closed 7th of January, 14th of January, like impossible times for most people to be doing this sort of work. Right, I'll get you to both step back. Thank you for the work on this. Any debate on Councillor Darby?
One of the items on this list is the 4-year term, which the government has discussed and is introducing a bill on. We'll be submitting on that. I think the government's on the right track on that. But of course, it has consequential impacts on local government representation, and we will be submitting, I expect, and we'll see the submission. I would hope that we're supporting the government initiative, but we're also pointing out that there needs to be a move to a 4-year term for local government, and I support that. From my experience of 21 years in local government, the pattern has been, you get elected and you're spending 1 year learning, coming up to speed, particularly new members, new mayors, lots of learning, lots of finger pointing, maybe a year governing proper, and then a year of electioneering. And I think that just reinforces the short-termism disease that Auckland and Aotearoa New Zealand has. We've just talked about 30-year infrastructure. We fail to look long. We fail to have a vision for future generations yet to be born. We're so focused on the near term of becoming re-elected. And I think that's a real problem. And I think adding another year would help not just this city, but the whole nation to look longer and plan longer and look beyond our own existence as elected members. But on that note, I think there will be some concern about that, and I can see it at the central government level. I think there's going to be some parties that want to just run with the status quo because they think that extra year is a risk. And I can see the same arguments being applied to not adopting it at local government levels, of that extra year being a risk. So I'm actually proposing this is one of the things that I've seen as absent for elected members. We don't get tested. Directors at boards get tested. All around the country, they get tested by performance evaluation reviews. And now, I know this might be controversial, but I would suggest at the halfway point, at the 2-year mark, in our submission, that we propose some work to be done. I'm not saying this is an absolute. I'm not saying this is a landing point. But I'm saying that maybe government and local government New Zealand, which we're not part of, but this council could look at a 2-year mark performance evaluation report for the council entity and all the local boards, and then individual individual members' evaluation reviews as well. That's what directors at Auckland Transport, at Panuku, and all the major companies around New Zealand are subject to annually. I'm not saying the same, but I'm saying, given the extension of the extra year to 4 years, that we could investigate some kind of performance evaluation review. I'm not giving the detail at the moment, and it could be mandatory, or it could be voluntary. I would definitely sign up for both of those. I think it would assist me as an elected member. But that's what I'm suggesting that the staff consider as they write up their submission. At least looking at that with government, who will be looking at not just the 4-year central government term, but the local government term as well, I expect, and looking at how that halfway market point where elected members can be evaluated, either mandatory or voluntary, but at least start looking at it. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on the point about the short timeframes here and point out that actually this is a little bit different from how we operate, because what we're talking about here, when a call goes out for submissions, that's actually for the public as well. It's not just for us. And when we go out and do public consultations, we very assiduously avoid doing them in late December and in January. In fact, we've had a number of discussions at this very table about asking staff, can you make sure that you don't do this consultation until, say, February or March? Often in workshops where we're talking about, when we do consultations, we're asking about timeframes, acknowledging that those are not good times of year to do it. So while there might be things that come to this table for our decision making on relatively short notice, That's usually off the back of workshops, that's usually off the back of some public consultation. We're talking about just the public consultation part of the process, which is less than ideal, the way that Parliament is framing it. And yes, the previous government did do it too. I feel like this government is worse, but I would say that. So you have to take that with a grain of salt, and I'm sure you all do. And a little bit of pepper there too. I've been told I need to be spicy around the table, so there you go. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. There is an important difference here where these are submissions, not just from us, but from the public as well. And doing them on the 20th of December is, I think, in bad faith. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baker.
I think potentially one of the things we could be tested on is our ability to adhere to and remain on track in some of the agenda items that we have, because we've certainly gone down some wild stuff here, and so, you know, that's my comment.
Thanks, Councillor. That was a 7-second contribution. Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I don't want to be impolite, and we'll have this discussion a little bit later, but I just wanted to signal to staff that I don't agree with the performance review corridor that's been said in the debate. So it is controversial, and we'll have to come back to that debate and at a later time when we actually have to debate it. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Oh, Councillor Williamson.
Look, I don't want to take time, but I'll be really quick on something Councillor Darby raised, the 4-year term. I've seen quite a bit of internal polling that's going on, and I don't think it's going to ever get public support. There's a concern out there about it. So I've suggested an alternative which you might want to think about. The biggest debate about 4-year terms that goes on is when you're a new incoming government. It takes you a year to get your feet under the table, to learn what's going on, to get rid of some of the stuff the previous lot had done that you don't like. But if you're not a new incoming government, if you're just re-elected, you go back to your desk the next day as if work carried on. I've been in 2 incoming governments, 1990 and 2008, and that first term was just horrendous work to get up to speed and then so on. So I've suggested, why don't we look at a 4-year term whenever there's a change of government, because that first year is actually a wasted year. But if you're just a repeating government, that's the same one going back in each time. There'll be a few ministers change, but the vast bulk of them don't. Then just make it a 3-year, because otherwise, if we stick with 4 years as the proposal, it'll be like the flag referendum. It doesn't have public support at present.
Kia ora, Councillor. Right, don't think there's any other speakers. All those in favour? Any opposed? No, thank you. Right, on to item 12. And just